Hello, everybody. Welcome back. It's Monday, December 16th, 2024. And my name is John. This is my channel, The Origin Factory. Anyways, we're struggling to do one video a day. I'll get into that after the introduction here. It's not going to happen one a day, and I'll get into that a little bit deeper. But what we did work on today was our Vanquish Optic. And I mentioned in the previous video, I had a few things on the list I wanted to do to that. One was shorten the wheelbase. Another one was fabricate a hood for it out of aluminum. And another thing was to do a custom livery for it. And we made progress on most of that. So before I get into it any deeper, first I want to thank our subscribers. You guys are awesome. Thank you very much. If you haven't subscribed yet and you're willing to do so, it'd be greatly appreciated. If you subscribed already, if you continue to support us by either like, commenting, or sharing. You can also find us on Instagram and Facebook as The Origin Factory. So, doing one video a day I'm finding is very difficult. And main reason being, it's over a half-hour drive to my studio. I mean, it's more like 40 minutes, really, honestly. And then in the winter, it tends to be a little longer because our road conditions aren't always favorable. And those of you who don't live in snow country, there's days we drive on the roads where it's icy, snow covered, and you just reduce your speeds and it takes longer to drive. And so sometimes on those days, it's a higher risk for being in a car accident. And some days you just don't feel like leaving the house. It's kind of like, because, we have snow removal here that's provided by the state, and which is awesome. We need that. But the downfall of that is it's not instantaneous. Meaning that we still have slippery road conditions, meaning ice and snow. And just because they clear the roads, because it's so cold, the roads are still slippery. And then what they do is they apply salt to the roads, which helps melt the snow and get it back down to bare pavement. Which most of our roads are asphalt. We do have some concrete, but for the most part, it's asphalt roads. And so this week we were minus 20 degrees, I think. Well, I don't think we quite hit minus 20. I think it was minus 15, minus 17 Fahrenheit. Somewhere in there was the coldest we saw. And today it's 32 degrees. I mean, so Fahrenheit. So we went from, minus 20 some Celsius to 0 in a day or so. Well, about 2 days. So that's a 40 degree swing for us in Fahrenheit. Which is, it's hard to process sometimes when you think about the huge variable, the wide range of temperatures here, where we'll swing 40 degrees Fahrenheit in a day or two, and it'll still be below freezing. It'll still be winter. If it was summer and it went from 50 to 90, you'd be like, holy smokes, it got hot. But it's funny here when you start getting below 15 degrees above 0 Fahrenheit, it just kind of all starts to feel the same. So then when it gets into minus 17, minus 20, and our low for this part of the world I think our state holds the record low for temperatures for the United States, which is around minus 30 Fahrenheit. And I don't remember exactly where Fahrenheit and Celsius cross over. All scales have a point they cross over, and Fahrenheit and Celsius cross over in the minuses. And I think it's around between minus 30 and minus 40. That it's exactly the same temp for either scale. So yeah. So when I say minus 30 Fahrenheit, it's just about the same in Celsius. And that we don't see quite as often, but we usually see minus 20 every winter. Minus 30 is something we see, maybe 1 or 2 days, but not on a regular basis. Minus 20 we'll probably see for a few weeks, not continuous, but just kind of drops in and out of it. And the reason I mention all of this is one of our regular viewers is Alan and he's from Australia. And he made the suggestion, just kind of touch base with some of the things in this part of the world, so people had a little idea of what this part of the world is and what it's like. And like I've mentioned before, our winter is, it's an honest 6 months. I mean, it starts around the beginning of November, and it kind of trickles into April, somewhere in there. It's kind of 6 months on, 6 months off type thing. But yeah, so we had a really extreme temperature swing. And how that contributes to me not able to make videos as easy is road conditions for driving. We're used to driving in the garbage, meaning wet and snow and all that crap. But when it starts to get, into the minus degrees, it gets to the point that the treatments we use for our roads to help keep them clear and dry and not slippery and icy, it stops working. Or it works much slower, that kind of stuff. So when we have really extreme temperature swings, there's days you just don't want to travel, especially if, like I said, it's like 40 minutes. It's like 40 minutes to my studio in the winter. And so when the roads are less than favorable, it may take another 15, 20 minutes. So it might take me an hour to get here. So there's days where it's like, I just don't feel like traveling because, it's a higher risk for car accidents, that kind of stuff. Because even though they treat the roads, it doesn't happen instantly. And even when they put the treatment down, it doesn't make the roads better instantly. So we have a delayed reaction to our weather sometimes, meaning how long it takes the state to deal with the weather conditions and how long it takes for the treatments to be effective. So it's, reasonably safe to drive. So that's kind of what's getting in the way now. And then the other thing that contributes to this is I don't have internet at the studio. I am trying to get it. I don't really want to do Starlink because of the cost. We do have fiber optic coming through in the area. My studio is in a very rural area, so it hasn't had internet ever before, and they're just recently starting to put it in. And due to it being winter and they bury it, the work ceases in the winter because it's very difficult to bury when the ground is frozen. The ground gets like solid as a rock here in the winter because it's frozen. All the moisture in it just freezes solid. So anyways, I don't want to go too deep into the Mr. Weather stuff and what it's like to live here in this part of the world, but Alan thought it might be of interest, so I thought I would drop some of that in here and just let you guys know what it's like in this part of the world. So we did work on optic today, and like I mentioned in the previous video, what I wanted to do with my optic this winter was shorten the wheelbase, and I wanted to make a custom hood for it and grill area that matches the custom livery I want to do for it. The custom livery alone will, make it look like what I'm trying to make it look like. But looking at how I think it'll be fairly easy to make a hood for it, because the hood on the, on the inspiration for this project is pretty basic, meaning a lot less. It's really rough and square edge and that kind of stuff. I'm like, yeah, I may not have the best metal fab skills, but I know I can do that just because of how raw that hood is on that particular Ultra 4 race rig. So we're going to make an aluminum hood, and I'm going to show you the process for what I'm using to make a template for it. And I'm going to show you the links on the bottom end of it, and I'm going to show you the differences in wheelbase lengths between Vanquish VS410 chassis like Phoenix and Fordyce and Pro and Ultra and Origin, and all those have the same wheelbase, and even the VRD has the same wheelbase, which it is over an inch, or is about an inch shorter, which is, close to 20 millimeters shorter wheelbase compared to the optic. And I noticed right away when I got my optic, it steered like a long vehicle, and which kind of surprised me. Maybe the steering isn't as tight in the front as the other axles, or maybe it is just the added wheelbase, but added wheelbase will make stuff steer not quite as sharp. And also I wanted to help with belly clearance, because when you have the axles, the wheels out further from each other, the belly is less likely to drag. And that's, so my optic, I was running 2.2s on there so I could get larger diameter tires to get a little higher. And so shorten the wheelbase, I'm hoping I'm going to run 1.9s now with just a taller 1.9. And, I'm not a big fan of 2.2s. To me, they look a little cartoonish, at least on this vehicle. So I want to get back to 1.9s, because I have an awesome set of wheels for this project that will match what the inspiration for the project is. That's the other thing about this. It's like, man, I got the wheels that match it. See, I enjoy modeling more than I enjoy driving some days. Well, sometimes I enjoy driving more than modeling, but so being able to go out there and try to recreate something and find an inspiration for something you want to create and then realizing, yeah, that's within my wheelhouse. I should be able to pull that off and make it look pretty good. So it's kind of like, good, I get to model something. Anyway, so we're going to go to the overhead camera and we're going to look at the chassis differences between Optic and a VS410 Origin chassis, just to show the difference in the wheelbases and that stuff, and show a little bit of differences with the belly. And yeah, because another thing with the belly is, meaning the skid plate, is that, like on the VRD, they angle it. So they angle the rearmost part of the skid plate up. So when you're, climbing up something, and as it starts to crest and it falls down, if this is the rig, and then the skid plate is the same parallel to it, the skid plate could drag for a period of time and get hung up. But, if this is your rig, say this is your rig and this is your skid plate, then you angle your skid plate and then you flatten it out as you crest a hill. You may touch ever so briefly, or you may not touch at all as it's coming down on where it's starting to slope up. So the VS410 and the Optic, the skid is parallel to the ground, whereas like on the VRD, it's slanted. It would be pretty difficult to slant the skid plate on the Optic because it's an all plastic chassis. So it'd be hard to modify it and get ground clearance that way. I mean, and besides, it's not designed to be that type of a rig anyways. It's more of a fun to drive type thing. But just, I noticed it drags a little bit easier and stuff when I ran it in its stock form initially. So I was going to see if I can correct some of that stuff and see if it makes a difference. It may not, or it may just be ever so slight. So this is just stuff that was rambling around in my head and projects I wanted to try this winter. So let's switch to the overhead camera and do a little overview. Come on, camera, stop bouncing. There we go. So let's start off with the VS410 as our reference for a reference of wheelbase. And wheelbase is defined as the center of one axle to the center of the other axle. So front to rear. And on a VS410 Vanquish, which is all the VS410s, Fordyce, Phoenix, Pro, Ultra, Origin, all that kind of stuff, they are about 12.25 inches, which is also 250-ish, 252 millimeters. And the Optic is about an inch longer at about 13.25 inches, which is around 270 millimeters. My complaint early on with this truck when I first started driving it, or buggy, whatever you want to call it, was it felt long the way it steered. And it also felt long because it seemed like the belly dragged easier. And when you stretch the axles out, the distance, it brings the belly lower when you're over high ground. So if you use larger diameter tires, you can raise that distance up between the bottom of the skid and the ground. You can increase that by raising wheel diameter tires, or you can increase it by using larger wheels because generally the tires are a larger overall diameter, which will raise the center up. But what also helps that is shortening the links. So if you shorten the links and bring one end, both ends or one end in shorter, the belly will be less likely to drag due to shortening that distance. It will also change how tightly it steers. Longer wheelbases, they steer not nearly as tight as they do with a shorter wheelbase. Those of you who've ever driven trucks or pickups and then jump in a car, and granted, some of them have a tighter steering radius, the steering in the front, the stops, you can steer tighter, but in general, you'll notice right away a longer vehicle is just harder to steer. It needs more, it takes more distance, takes more area. So what I'm going to try to do to my Optic is, because I'm not going to add four-wheel steer, and I kind of want to add the extra ground clearance in the belly back like on a VS410. I'm running 2.2s on it right now, and it does help a little bit, but I kind of hate the looks of the 2.2s. They look kind of cartoonish. They're very big. And so I'm trying to get it back down to 1.9s. One thing I noticed also, and this is just a little, when you're working on your toy trucks, take a look at this. See how this back axle is slopping around? That's because on this link here, the rod ends are starting to stretch out. The other side's tight, but this side is definitely stretched out. I'm not going to worry about replacing the rod ends on these because this is the end. I'm going to exchange the links to shorter ones. So not necessary to fix those rod ends as of yet, or no reason to. But on the front, I'm having the same problem with this one. This one's slopping out. This one, that one seems tight still. So I may just, and on the Optic, these links are the same length, the lower links. They're each, so when so not to confuse you, so I'll define right away how I'm referring to it. So I refer to the links as their center to center of the eye. So that's how you would measure the overall length. And the reason I do that is because sometimes you put different ends on and that impacts the length. But if you're gonna buy links, sometimes they measure them by this distance between the links. So what I'm going to refer to today is just eye to eye. So eye to eye, these are 140 millimeters, the lower links, and the tops I think are 130 or somewhere. I know the rear ones are 130 on the top. I didn't measure the front one, but anyways, and the reason we're shortening the rear is because the distance between the servo and the front of the transmission is really tight. So we can't bring that any further back and still have the servo mounted to the axle. Otherwise, the servo will start running into the front of the transmission, which will impact our suspension travel. The way to combat that, if you wanted to shorten the front, you would need to move the servo to the chassis mount. And then you'd have to deal with the drop and the angles leading to the servo and all that fun stuff. Not impossible, but it's just the way I would rather deal with it right now is shorten the rear and just shorten the lengths, because I know I got enough room in the drive shaft to shorten it a few, 10 millimeters or so. And also the rear shock mounts, the upper mounts have more than one mounting position. So if I bring it in, it seems like they're starting to bottom out or not quite I could also raise them a notch, it looks like. I think there's one extra hole in there. So we got a few options here for tuning it a little bit. And you got to keep that same ratio of the links. You can't have equal links top and bottom because their mounting positions are different. And what you're doing when you change the links and you're not keeping that same ratio is you'll start angling the pinion up or down based on which one's shorter and which one's longer than what it normally is, as far as the ratio. So you got to keep it close. So like I said, it's like 130 for the upper and around 140 for the lower. So I'm going to try to keep that 10 millimeter difference with what I have available, digging through my box of stuff, and we'll see what we can do. Like I said, it's roughly 13.25 inches wheelbase, which is around 270 millimeters. So I got marked on the tape here. The farthest most point is optic in the stock optic. That front mark is a VS410 chassis. So I got some links. We're going to change them out and we're going to see how close we can get to the VS410 wheelbase. And we're rolling again. So we're going to take these lower links out. And if you guys aren't aware, if you haven't taken an optic apart yet, or if you haven't built a kit, we got two different sizes of screws here. And the links I have are bent links, extra for clearance. So I Ay, ay,
He's
ay.
celebrated for what? Why is his story so famous?
Ay, ay, ay. Close that. Keep that away. Anyways. Get that one out. So here's my pile of links. And, you know, because these have threaded ends, you don't have to bottom it out. If you need a little more length, you know, a few millimeters here or there, you can always make these a little longer. You don't have to run them completely bottomed out. I mean, granted, if you run them out a little ways, there's less threads gripping inside the rod end. So it'll be easier for them to pull out the ends. So you don't want to go too far with them. So, but like I said, you can do a little fine tuning with them. Get yourself an extra millimeter here or there. Of course, it doesn't want to go in there. There we go. We are doing this. I did not pre-fit any of this. So this is a wing and a prayer here. So if this works out, it's working out because we just lucked out and it just happened to be right, I guess. The heck is that one from? That's not from here. Da 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 da. Anyways, see if I can do it without flipping it around. Do it a little blind. Heck yeah. Yes, we can. Yes, we can. So I'm going to leave that out. I'm just going to switch it over to this one. Ooh, shocks don't like that. So we're going to remove the shocks right now because we're going to have to deal with that as part of this dilemma, part of this changeover. They are going to be too short, unfortunately. Or they're going to be too long, I mean, not too short. No, we're not going to go away with it being that short. We'll have to use a front drive shaft. That's too short. Okay, let's grab another set of links. These we're going to hopefully shorten it by, I think 20 millimeters, going from 140 to 120s. So that is not going to work. That is too drastic of a change. So I do have another option. Which they are about 10 millimeters shorter. Which that I think we can get away with. This was just being overly optimistic and hoping things would just be that easy. But That's what happens. So now, if you take the upper and make it the lower, because that's 10 millimeters shorter, that is more likely. That looks like we've got a chance to make that work. We can always shorten the drive shaft. I mean, I've got metal ones on. I got a metal one on there, but I could switch it to a front. Oh, that's not that one. That one's too long. I guess there is more than one length on here. Yep, that's... So before I even take it out from the skid, I am just going to attach it to the axle first, and then I'll relocate it in the skid. So now these are, like I said, these are the upper links, which are about 130. And now I need to have uppers that are around 120, which I do have. Let's see. Was it these? Oh, those are really long. So as you're going to notice on this, I'm using fat ones on the uppers because that's the length I need. And I'm using small diameter ones on the lower, which are opposite of the way they build their products. But we're doing it on the cheap today. If it works, maybe I'll order a larger diameter for the lower one, so it's a little more resilient. It's not going to hurt to have thicker ones on the upper, I don't think. So we'll leave those in there. And actually, since we already got the there we go. Yeah, looks like our pinion angle is going to be pretty good. Having that 10 millimeters of offset, I think, is what we need 10 millimeter difference in length between upper and lower to keep the pinion angle proper. Oh, come on. Go in there. There we go. And there we go. It moves freely. It is doing suspension things. Let's get that nut on that. Let's get these extra links out of here. And I need to, sometimes I don't follow through all the way right away. But I'm going to try to remember to tighten that nut on the upper links right up now. It seems like I always kind of throw stuff together loose. Just to wait till I'm completely done. And then I usually forget. Ooh. Yeah, I am. Pinion is not very. So if you look at the pinion in the front, pinion is right there. It's, you know, it's got a slight angle going up. Now it's definitely got it's uphill a little bit on the rear. So I have to either shorten the top or I got to lengthen or I should say either I got to shorten the lower or lengthen the upper. So that's what you get into when you start modifying this stuff. You start playing with everything as a result of one change. So I'm going to pause the camera here for a second and I'm going to go dig through my links and see if I got anything slightly longer or shorter on either end. And we'll go from there. Be right back. Okay. So here's how I resolved the pinion angle. I left the top links alone. I did not try to extend them. I took these lower links. They were not threaded in all the way, so I bottomed them out, which did cause the pivot balls to tighten up. Because if you do run them in all the way, you can start to pinch the ball. So then I backed them off enough so each end was free. And now I got the pinion angle nice and flat, you know, slightly uphill, just like the front one. Which is going to require me to shorten the drive shaft, which isn't a huge deal. And I did notice to use the shocks that I'm using, it's going to, if you look on the back here, focus. There. So you see there's two holes that are drilled, and it's marked for a third one, I'm going to need to drill out that third one to get the shocks higher. Otherwise, it's going to push the axle down and make it ride higher. So get it back to the same ride height, I'm going to have to drill out this third hole. Like I said, not a big deal. But remember, when you're drilling these out, you're putting a self-tapping screw in there. So you can't drill it to the size of the screw. Otherwise, it won't have much grip strength. What you should do is slightly undersize it. And then let the screw do the work so it can create some threads for it to sink into it so it stays tight. I already did one side, but let's see here. Plastic on plastic. Sounds. Let's see. Let's extend it out there a little bit since we're not drilling the steel. It should be. There we go. And just for reference, that drill bit is a 3/32. I am not converting fractions into millimeters. Sorry, folks. Sorry to my metric speaking friends. There we go. Yeah. Yeah, baby. Let's get rid of this link. Toss her over here. Toss her over there. Everybody's a tosser, which I believe is a slang word in other parts of the world. America, it's not really a slang. I think the proper English people, the British English people, I think it's a derogatory term. So now let's get her back on the, get it marked up, get it lined up where it's supposed to be. So yeah, so that brought us halfway in between. So we'll put our new mark right there. So that means we shortened it a 1/2 inch. Will it make a big difference? I have no idea till I drive it. But it'll probably make some difference, especially with the belly. Might help the steering a little bit. But like I said, I noticed it right away driving it just because of everything I was driving was shorter. You know, I noticed right away. So maybe that 1/2 inch will make a difference. But there you go. Not a completely terrible project to do. So the drive shaft, you know, I got the Incision drive shafts. So we still have, let's get our measuring stick out. Where's my little one? There we go. Where's the one we use for hardware? Itty bitty, the credit card. So we still have almost 10 millimeters where it could travel into this, to the female end of the drive shaft. So what I am going to do, because if you stick it in there right now, it is really close. It is really close to being the right length. It is just slightly too long. Because then that's not fully compressed either. So I am going to go for that whole 10 millimeters. So that way, if it does articulate in such a way where it needs that full travel, we will be just fine. So this is going to require metal cutting tools. And I do have a die grinder here with a cutoff wheel. So we're going to put this in the vise, mark it up, see if we can get her in there, and we're going to take about 10 millimeters off. So I'll be right back. And here's just a little quick example of how I cut off metal stuff, especially cylindrical stuff, round stuff, whatever. I use a piece of tape. I measure where I want to cut up to, meaning the edge of the tape. Because sometimes when you cut into like a crayon mark or a marker or a scribe, a scratch or whatever, sometimes it gets hard to see. But when you wrap it with a piece of tape, provided you put it on there fairly flat, and perpendicular to the surface, meaning equal distance from the end, you have a nice straight line that goes around the whole outside of what you're cutting. So as long as you don't cut into the tape, you're cutting exactly the amount you want to, and you always have a reference point. So use that in your next adventure with cutting. And we're rolling again. So there, we cut the end off. Cut about 10 millimeters off. And always remember, put your drive shaft in phase, which means both yokes have to be matching in the same direction. This is the yoke end and this is the yoke end. See how the pins are lined up? That's to minimize binding when during suspension travel. So as you can see, with it all the way bottomed out, I have space to move into, whereas before it wouldn't travel the full distance due to the drive shaft being too long. And now we put because this is a steel screw into a steel threads, I put a little bit of blue Loctite on that. Why? Because these I have had come apart. I have had drive shafts just loosen up for that screw to come out, and it's a tiny screw, and it's not the type of screw you usually carry with you. So, being that it's steel on steel, it comes apart relatively easy. But yeah, we got our full travel back. It's not sitting too. Actually, it might be. Oh, that's right. So I got pricey shocks on here. I did have to invert them because the shock body was getting in the way of the chassis. And I think his are designed to run the. They might be designed to run the direction they're mounted in, horizontal or vertical. I may have to take them apart because they're internally sprung. I may have to put the springs the other direction. I don't know if that's enough to satisfy that or not. But I don't know. It's sitting pretty good. We'll just run her, see what happens. It's not a nuclear-powered submarine, so what could go wrong, right? Okay, I'm going to get the wheels and tires back on this. Okay, we're recording. Anyways, so this is what I use to make my cardboard hood. So this is like a envelope for shipping documents in the mail, like it's a light cardboard. And so what I did was I took the stock optic hood. I knew I was making a grill in the front, so I went extra. I just kind of traced it out with a Sharpie, just kind of, went much larger than it was, and then cut it down to size. And we ended up with this. So, I mean, this is all loose because it's cardboard, but so this is going to be the grill area with headlights. I'm not going to put those in there yet. That'll be done in the aluminum. And this will be bent into a filler panel on the chassis and then a front mounting point on an existing hole on the chassis. And we got the sides bent, got the holes located, all that fun stuff. The prototype that is the inspiration for this, it has the shocks are covered. So the shocks are basically the hoops for the shocks are riding right in here. And then the chassis rails come out here. Like I said, that'll be bent to like a vertical. And this will have one bend, and then they'll have another bend here. And actually, the prototype has a filler panel there too. So it's going to be pretty cool. It's going to look very much like what we're modeling it after. And so now it's ready for. Now basically, I'm going to lay this out flat. Straighten out the bends. And put this flat, and then trace it out exactly on the aluminum. And then cut it to size, and then make the bends. And hopefully we do it in the first try. Doesn't always work out that way, but we'll make an honest effort to do it the first try. It's not going to break my heart if we don't, because this is a pretty simple project. So if we got to do it more than once, it's not a huge deal because it's not a lot of work. The most labor is going to be cutting it out. The bends will be pretty quick. The cutting is going to be the most labor intensive out of all this. But shouldn't be too bad. It'd probably spend 2-3 hours laying it out, cutting, and maybe getting it to the final product. But yeah, so like I said, started with a larger piece, basically in the same shape. Cut her down to size. There's the stock optic hood. So as you can see there, the grill on the optic is out much further because the hood goes much deeper. And this one abruptly ends before the end of the chassis, just like on the prototype. And then, of course, the optic hood has cutouts for the shocks, but it has this bulge design. And after I reveal the livery, I'll show you the prototype pictures of the prototype that were used for inspiration. And it has a flat hood, and it's very basic hood. And it does have an air cleaner that's mounted right here by my thumb. So I'm going to try to figure out how to do. It's a front engine rig. So the air filter pops out of the hood through here. So I'm going to figure out how to do that. I don't know if I'm going to mount it to the hood and have it coming on and off, or mount it to the chassis and then have this horseshoe shaped. But anyways, it'll make sense as we go. So yeah, so that's how we made the hood. It's just cutting and shaping. It's just a lot of little futsy work. Scissors, X-Acto knife, just start cutting and trimming. And if you get to a point you cut too much, you can add it back in with tape like I did here, add a piece on. If you cut up too much, start over, or maybe use your one that you're on as a starting point and use that as a template to start over instead of starting with a large piece like this. Started with your one you want to redo, and maybe just make it slightly larger so you have something to work with, something like that. So yeah, pretty basic stuff. We'll cover the aluminum part when we get to there. So we'll go to the other bench right now and look at it mounted on the Optic. Okay, here we go. So here it is with the wheels and tires on. These are the Spec RC wheels that resemble the Ultra 4 wheels on the prototype that was the inspiration for this. So it's cool when you can find wheels that match what you're modeling. The blue panels are not the panels I'm using. I'm going to be using black panels because it'll better match the custom livery we're going to put on here. There's the hood laid out on there, mounted the way it's supposed, or what it's going to fit after we make it out of aluminum. There will be a grill area here. There will be headlights. Right now, we're just making a template for how we're going to cut out the aluminum. We're going to lay this flat. We're going to open up the cardboard and lay it flat, and we're going to trace it out on a piece of aluminum. Then we're going to figure out how we're going to cut it and where we're going to bend it, and then we'll form it into shape. And hopefully we'll do it on the first try. If not, we'll do it again. But what's wonderful about the cardboard is it's very easy to work with. It's quick to make changes. You know, you can always add tape and tape it back together, or you can just start over if you're making too many modifications. But so this area here is vertical. Then there's a taper here, and then there's a taper here, and then we're mounting it to the center hole that's already exists in the chassis. And then we're covering up all the mounting points. And actually the prototype that we're modeling this after has a filler panel in here also. So this is actually resembling of the prototype. Just for reference, this is where the original Optic grill fits. So meaning that the hood would taper down all the way down to the top edge here. And if you have an Optic, you know that it has cutouts for the shocks to poke through. But the prototype I'm modeling, they do have, their shocks are shielded a little bit by the hood. So I was trying to do that as best I could. And the only downside to that is the hood is slightly uphill, ever so slightly. I may balance it out with raising the rear a little bit. And so, it is kind of noticeable that it's slightly uphill, but ever so slightly. And also the prototype it's a front engine U4. So it's got an air cleaner right here. And I'm going to make an air cleaner of some sort. I might make that out of styrene, or if I find something that's a cylinder with an end on it, I may just cut it to size, for the height and use that, provided it's a similar diameter. Haven't quite figured that part out yet. And then, like I said, I gotta go get the livery figured out today, meaning today, Monday, and talk to those guys and see how busy they are for the holiday season, if they've got time to squeeze this in or not. But yeah, this is with the shortened wheelbase. So this is a 1/2 inch shorter, which, like we mentioned in the overhead video, the Optic is an inch wheelbase. The wheelbase is an inch longer, which is about 20 millimeters longer than the VS410 and the VRD chassis. So hoping that makes a difference. I won't be able to do any video anytime soon to try it out, because we are full-born winter right now. And last winter was really mild, so we had chances to go out and try, and do some driving during the winter. And I don't think we're going to be that lucky this year. The only way we're going to be able to do any driving this winter is indoors somewhere. We can go out in the snow and stuff, but not that I wouldn't, but the problem with that is it's not going to fully mimic dry conditions and to tell me if it really drives any differently than it did before. Because with the changing wheelbase and trying to get it to steer sharper, by shortening the wheelbase, you're going to feel that more on high traction surfaces. And when we got snow and stuff, you're not really going to notice the difference if the wheelbase is a 1/2 inch shorter, an inch longer, an inch shorter. You're really not going to notice the difference in snow in slippery conditions. So, it might be a few months before I even get to test drive this the way I would normally drive it. So, yeah, I'm happy with it. Got a lot of progress in one day. Got the sway bar in there, got the links shortened. I will probably get lower links made to the right dimensions just because I'm using the lightweight upper links. I kind of like to have the larger diameter probably won't make a difference necessarily. Don't know for sure. But I may just have lowers rebuilt, lower set built, just so we have them the right length and the heavier one. So let's go back to the other bench and do a wrap up. Okay. So in summary, briefly go back over the mods to the chassis on the links for the optic. So as I showed there, it was like 130 millimeter upper link, 140 millimeter lower link. And when I say the length on it, I'm saying eye to eye, not the length of the link, but the length of the connection points, where it bolts together, the dead center of each. And that's usually how you measure stuff like that, like rods. Like if you measure any type of linkage on a car, you measure center to center of where they attach. And that's just common practice because the other stuff introduces variables that aren't always consistent. And if you were to just measure the length of the rod, well, we don't always use the same rod ends, and the rod ends aren't always the same length. And so it's not, you'll need to measure rods sometime. Well, it depends on the builder who's building for you, because some of them are prepared to deal with it that way just to make it easier for you as the customer to give them the information. But ultimately, they're cutting the rod shorter. So anyways, that depends on who's building the rods for you. Just ask them how, they'll tell you exactly what they want you to measure to shorten them. So what I did in the rear was I had shortened it by about 10 millimeters. And so that changed the lower one to around 130 millimeter and the upper one to around 120. And as you saw in the in the overhead stuff, it was not quite right with the pinion angle. And so what I did to correct that, because the pinion angle was angling not into the truck, but away from it, meaning down. And so what I did was the lower links, I saw that the rod ends were not in all the way. And so I screwed them in all the way. And I noticed, so when you do that though, check to make sure your balls are still free. Make sure your balls are free. Anyways, the pivot balls inside the rod ends. If you bottom out the rod in there and then go past a little bit, it'll pinch the ball in the rod end and put pressure on it, and it won't operate freely. And so I checked my rod ends, I checked my balls. Anyways, that's going to come back to haunt me. Anyways, so I backed them off a little bit so the balls are free, and then they rotate freely, because if they don't, your suspension's going to bind. And so I checked both of them, backed them off, so both were free, and that was enough to get the pinion angle. So then if this being your rig, and this being your transmission skid, and this being your axle, my pinion angle is angling down. And so I got it so it was just slightly angled uphill, just like the front, just from adjusting the rods. Now, adjusting them out can be a potential problem, like to gain length, because you start losing the amount of grip you have on the screw. So if your screw, if this is where you're threading into the rod end, so if you're in all the way, you've got all this grip length, the threads are gripping that much more. So when you pull it out to gain more length, now you may cut it in half how much grip you have on the rod end. And the reason that's important is when you start putting stress on it, that opens you up to potentially ripping the threads out under stress, more so than if it was in there all the way, because it just has more grip on the screw. So that's something to consider if you're adjusting out. It's a little bit riskier as far as longevity of the amount of abuse you'll be able to take. And then, of course, as noted in the overhead, that the steering servo is extremely close to the front of the transmission, so it's very difficult to shorten up the front end because the servo is mounted to the front axle, and so that is floating up and down, and it's running parallel to the face of the transmission, the cover, and it's very close. So if you were to shorten the rod ends, even by 5 to 10 millimeters, the servo would start rubbing on on the cover of the transmission. So the only way you could fix that is to mount the servo, chassis mount it, and then you'd have to deal with the linkage and how it travels through, because I don't know. You might have to change it to a 3-link to do the steering. Oh man, I don't know for sure, but anyways, there'd be a lot more engineering to put the servo in the chassis. This is definitely a much quicker way to shorten it, is by shortening the rear, and I don't really see a disadvantage to shortening one, a positive or a negative to shortening one versus the other. I mean, ultimately, I think it'd be nice to shorten both ends, but whatever. We shaved 10 millimeters off of it, which saved us a 1/2 inch. So now we're we went from 13 1/4 inches to 12 3/4, I think it is. So we split the difference, which probably will notice a difference there. Maybe not 12 3/4, a little bit less. But anyways, that's why I like using metric for measurements. It's like, oh, it's just all in 10s and 1s. And when you start to get into fractions with inches, it's just, fractions are really a pain in the butt. That's where the metric system really outshines standard measurement, because the fractions are just, a lot of people don't understand fractions. It's hard to teach fractions. It's just, anyways. So, and then the hood. So basically I made a cardboard template, fitted it to the front of the to the optic where I want it to sit. And then I'm going to lay it flat on a piece of aluminum, trace it out, cut it, and bend it. And it'll be that simple. I mean, yes, that's not as simple as doing the cardboard portion of it, but at least the cardboard portion being that easy, it's easy to correct mistakes, easy to start over, not a lot of commitment to it. And then once you get exactly the way you want it, that is a very close facsimile to what you're going to need to cut it out for in metal. And like I said, we're going to use aluminum because it's easy to easy to build with. It's lighter. It's easy to bend, that kind of stuff. Plus, we don't need extra weight that high up. We want a lightweight material anyways. The flip side with it is I could use polystyrene also for the hood. And being that it's a hood, it'd probably be good enough. I mean, since I've had my optic, it does land on the hood occasionally. It does impact it, but yeah, styrene isn't very durable though. So we're going to do it out of aluminum, do what we can to make it right. And then, so the custom livery, if you guys want to do a custom livery, there's sign shops everywhere in the world pretty much, vinyl graphics, places that, like do vehicle wraps and, places that put, like commercial advertising on the side of vehicles, cars, trucks, that kind of stuff. Those are the type of people that could do this for you. And what the downside is, they're not really geared towards doing graphics for RC vehicles. I lucked out and found a shop that was familiar with it. So they were more receptive to trying it and doing it. But the flip side is, these shops kind of work per hour. So it's in your best interest to provide as much information as you can to streamline it for them. And if you're not able to lay it out yourself, if you're able to lay it out yourself and scale it, and then they can just print it, they will charge you minimal. So if you're very savvy with the computer and doing layout and design work, where you could do it all, but of course talk to the shop and ask what format they want, because then they could transfer it directly and hopefully print it if it's in the proper format. So anyways, you're going to have to talk to a shop, get a feel for it, depending on what your skill levels and what you can supply for them. When I did my Ripper, for example, I knew exactly what I wanted to do. I had a NAS truck as an inspiration for it, and so I knew how the layout was going to be. I knew what sponsors I wanted on the design, and I just provided all that information to it. I think we went back and forth 2 or 3 times, and it was acceptable for me. It was fulfilled my vision of how I wanted it, and he printed it. And with that in mind, if you have other vinyl stuff you need printed and you're having them do the design work, you might want to add it in, because it's kind of a la carte, meaning you're going to adding little projects on top of a bigger project is going to cost you minimal compared to if you were to go in there with just a small project. It'll most likely feel like an inconvenience or a waste of their time, because they're not going to feel like they're going to be able to charge charge you enough for the project to make it worth their while. So if you're going to do a project like this and you have other things you'd like to have printed on vinyl, do it now, especially if it's little stuff. They may just throw it in. They may just have a flat fee and say, you know what, we're going to charge you X amount of dollars to do this project. What if I added this? And they'll say, yeah, you can, I'll still do it for that price, that kind of stuff, because it's minimal added time, but they want to have enough labor in the job to make the job worthwhile to them, because, it's business sense, they're not there to do charity work, getting into business talk, but, so it's being as helpful to them to help it make it easier for them, to make them want to do more for you in the future kind of thing, and just be prepared to spend a little bit of money to get it done. And if you provide enough projects for them on top of it to make it worth your while to get a bunch done at once, then maybe the price will balance out and, your price per piece will go down. So overall, it'll be a little bit less expensive to do it one time versus space it out over 3 separate projects, for example. So, but ask them that kind of questions. They're usually pretty good at answering that kind of stuff, and they'll work with you. The biggest thing is just don't be a pain in the ass, be respectful, realize that this isn't something they probably don't want to work on. And, if you're the customer that's cordial and please and thank you, and they enjoy doing it for you, then you show them your gratitude, then they'll probably do it again. It's that simple. So yeah, that's about where we're at with the optic. So tomorrow I am going to, actually the video is going out Monday. This is Sunday night. So I am actually Monday going to go to the sign shop and touch base with them and see how busy they are and see how quickly they can do the artwork or apply it and lay it out and all that kind of fun stuff. And I'm hoping they can do it this week. I don't know for sure. Don't know if they're busy. I can't assume nothing. They may even be closed down. Sometimes in the United States, businesses close down for holiday season, that kind of stuff, and take their vacation time because maybe the shop is normally closed or normally slow, and they're just like, we're just going to shut down this time of year. But thankfully, Christmas doesn't fall during this week. It falls during next week. So hopefully they're open this week and we can squeeze in this job real quick. So if it is, we'll hopefully get it done before Christmas, at least the graphics and stuff. That'd be fun, at least get this one done. But anyways, if you lasted this long for all this jibber jabber, I hope you did. I hope you enjoyed it. So thank you again to all our subscribers. You guys are awesome. Thank you for subscribing. If you haven't subscribed yet and you're willing to do so, it would be greatly appreciated. And if you subscribed already, if you continue to support us by either like, commenting, or sharing, you can also find us on Instagram and Facebook as The Origin Factory. So hope you guys enjoyed this. Hope you guys have a great week. We will talk to you soon. Maybe tomorrow, maybe not. I don't know. I'm going to do what I can. God bless. Talk to you soon.